The air in the den was thick with the scent of a heavy Thanksgiving dinner and the biting tang of expensive cigar smoke. What was supposed to be a quiet holiday weekend had transformed into a theater of ego. Bradley, my cousin, sat at the head of the poker table, leaning back with a smugness that seemed to shrink the room. To Bradley, family gatherings weren't about connection, they were about measurement, measuring his success against our supposed stagnation. Suddenly, Bradley slammed his hand on the table. The sound made the older relatives jump. "This is boring," he declared, his eyes scanning the room for a target. "The stakes are too low. If we're going to play, let's actually put something on the line." Before anyone could respond, he reached into his pocket and slammed his BMW key fob onto the center of the table. The plastic clicked sharply against the wood. "Anyone dared to match it?" he challenged. "Or are you all just here to play for pennies?" I watched him closely. I knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't interested in the cards, he was just showing off that he had bought a BMW. He wanted to see the flicker of envy in our eyes. And, for a moment, he got it. Everyone else was intimidated. They looked at their own modest chips and folded their hands, their voices shrinking. "Just playing for fun, Bradley," they muttered. "Can't match that." Then, the napping began. The room filled with the sounds of relatives kissing his ass, telling him how amazing he was, and how incredible it was that someone so young was already driving a Beamer. Bradley soaked up every word of flattery, his chest swelling as he prepared to smugly shuffle the deck, convinced he had already won the night. I hesitated. I looked down at my whole cards. 3 kings. The weight of his arrogance was becoming unbearable. While everyone else was bowing to his success, I felt a cold clarity. I reached into my pocket, felt the keys to my BYD electric car, and slid them slowly into the center of the pot. "I am in," I said quietly. The entire room went silent. The laughter died in an instant. Bradley's eyes went wide, frozen in mid-smirk. Everyone stared at me in disbelief, and I could feel the atmosphere turn hostile. In that moment, as our keys sat side by side on the green felt, any sense of family vanished. I didn't regret it. He was the one who had put up his BMW first, he was the one who chose to play dirty with his own blood. I didn't give a damn about his feelings anymore. Bradley's face contorted into a sneer. "What money do you even have?" he barked. "You are trying to bluff me with that piece of shit? A BYD? This is a BMW, you idiot. Get your money together first. Don't try to scam me with that cheap electric crap." I stared at him coldly. I hated playing cards with Bradley. He used his wealth like a weapon, pushing huge bets every single time to ensure no one could actually play against him. Anyone who has played poker knows that having less money than your opponent leaves you with zero dignity, you just get steamrolled. Earlier, when we were betting a buck or two, he'd throw down 500. When we'd tell him not to play so big with family, he'd act innocent. Is 500 really that much? He was bullying us for being poor. He had come to this table specifically to toy with his poor relatives and our dignity. I knew my dignity couldn't match his BMW in his eyes. I turned and called over my girlfriend. We were about to get married, and she was wearing the gold jewelry I had saved for months to buy her. "Put your gold chain and bracelet on the table," I told her. Without even asking what my cards were, she looked Bradley in the eye, took off her jewelry, and placed it on the table. In that moment, a phrase popped into my head: with a wife like this, what more could a man ask for? "That is enough," I said to Bradley, my voice firm. "Now, are you going to show your cards?" Bradley's expression shifted. He clenched his jaw, shocked that I was actually standing my ground. He tried to hide his nerves with a mocking tone. "Little bro, don't say I didn't warn you. I can afford to lose a BMW, but if you lose everything, how is your whole family going to survive the next 5 years?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter. We'll get by our own way." My mind flashed back to the dinner table earlier. Bradley had been mocking me for being too timid and not daring to take big risks like he did as a business owner. But the real insult had happened when my dad offered him a cigarette. My dad tried to light it for him, and Bradley didn't even cup his hand around the flame to shield it. In our rural community, that is a profound act of disrespect. When an elder lights your cigarette and you don't shield the flame, you are publicly humiliating them. Everyone in the room had seen it, and no one had said a word. Bradley took a deep breath. "If we're gonna play, let's make it even bigger," he said, his eyes darkening. "That is the only way this is exciting for me." He placed his cards face down, covered them with a plate, and walked outside. We watched through the window as he went to his BMW's trunk and brought back a small wooden box. He flipped the latch, revealing bricks of cash. 300 grand, Bradley said proudly. "You win or not?" Uncle Jim freaked out immediately. "Are you crazy? That's your business advanced payment." Bradley just grinned, completely nonchalant. "It's fine. I can afford to play. Question is, does little bro here dare to match it?" I understood his scheme immediately. He wanted to keep raising the stakes until I ran out of things to bet, forcing me to forfeit. Uncle Jim, seeing my silence, actually laughed and went back to his mahjong game, ignoring me. I sat there, my fists clenched, knowing I couldn't produce $300,000 in cash. Then, my girlfriend spoke up, her voice steady and loud enough for the whole house to hear. "It is okay," she said. "We'll put up our house." The room fell into a silence so profound it felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out of the house. My girlfriend's words, "We'll put up our house," hung in the air like a death sentence. Every head turned to stare at her. The elders, who had been busy with their own games and gossip, froze mid-motion. Uncle Jim, who was about to draw a mahjong tile, let his hand hover in the air, his mouth slightly agape. Bradley's expression was a grotesque mixture of fury and sudden nervousness. He hadn't expected us to have anything left to give, let alone the deed to our lives. I saw his hands tremble slightly as he adjusted his posture. The fun was gone, the game had turned into a high-speed collision. The elders stopped playing mahjong entirely. They gathered around the poker table, their faces etched with concern. The stakes were no longer just high, they were life-altering. My dad was the first to break the silence. He rushed over, his face pale and eyes wide with panic. Without a word, he punched me in the shoulder, a frantic strike born of pure terror. "Are you out of your fucking mind?" My dad hissed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Are you trying to bankrupt the whole family? You're going to lose everything over a card game." He leaned over, trying to pry my fingers off my whole cards, desperate to see what I was holding so he could justify ending this madness. But I pressed down hard on the cards, my knuckles white against the felt. In poker, you never let anyone see your cards, especially not in a high-stakes war like this. If someone sees them, their expression alone can betray you to the opponent. "I have this under control, Dad," I said, my voice low and cold. "Our house is worth $500,000, my girlfriend said to Bradley, her voice unwavering. "That is $200,000 more than the cash you just put on the table. Are you in or not?" Bradley's eyes darted toward Uncle Jim. The older man stood up, his face reddening. "You are all insane," Jim shouted. He lunged at the table, his hands reaching for the chips and the car keys, trying to push them back toward us. "Stop messing with your cousin. Bradley is a big businessman. He doesn't want to make this personal. Apologize to him right now. Don't you want him to help you make money in the future?" I grabbed Uncle Jim's arm before he could touch the pot. My grip was iron. I stared him down, the fire of months of suppressed resentment finally burning through. "Get your fucking hands off our stuff," I roared. Uncle Jim flinched. He had never seen me like this. I looked him in the eyes and gritted my teeth. When he bet $500 on a friendly game, you didn't say anything. When he bragged at the dinner table about his success while mocking mine, you cheered him on. When he sat there and made my dad light his cigarette like a servant, you looked proud. He put his car keys on the table first. He turned this into a war. I am seeing this through to the end. Uncle Jim stammered, his face turning a deeper shade of purple. How dare you talk to an elder like that?" I ignored him and turned my gaze back to Bradley. "Either you match the $200,000 and show your cards, or you forfeit everything you've already bet. There is a third option, we call off the whole game, we both take our stuff back, but you have to bow and apologize to my dad for the way you treated him at dinner." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. No one dared to speak. Everyone remembered the cigarette incident. They had seen Bradley hold his cigarette with 2 fingers, letting my father light it without a word of thanks or a gesture of respect. Back then, they had all stayed silent, blinded by Bradley's wealth. Bradley laughed, but the sound was bitter and hollow. "You're going to be this arrogant with family?" he asked, his voice shaking. "The moment you put those car keys on the table," I replied, "we stopped being family." Bradley went silent for a few seconds. He looked at the cash box, then at my girlfriend, then at the house deed that was metaphorically resting on the table. A sneer returned to his face, born of a desperate need to maintain his alpha status. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't blame me for scaring you. You're the one who wanted to bet, right?" He suddenly picked up his whole cards. He didn't show the whole hand, but he flipped 2 of them over for the room to see, a pair of queens. A gasp ran through the relatives. A pair of queens was a monster hand in this situation. Bradley looked at me smugly, his confidence returning now that he had proven his strength. "Guess if my last card makes it 3 of a kind?" he challenged. Showing half your cards is a classic poker move, an attempt to intimidate the opponent and gauge their reaction. But Bradley's show-off move had actually backed him into a corner. I felt a massive surge of relief wash through me, though I kept my face as hard as stone. Even if he had the 3rd queen, my 3 kings still beat him. I had been worried he might be holding 3 aces, but now I knew that fear was gone. "I'm betting you're bluffing," I said, my voice showing a calculated strain. "Are you matching the bet or not?" Bradley stared hard into my eyes, trying to read my soul. Poker is all about acting and guts. Right now, he was drowning in the stakes he had created. Uncle Jim whispered to him, "Don't bet, Brad. Can't you see he isn't scared?" Bradley's face contorted. "If I don't bet, I lose the BMW and the 300 grand. He's got to be bluffing." Every bet had been his idea. Every escalation was his doing. If he backed down now, his reputation as the big businessman of the family would be shattered forever. He wouldn't just lose money, he would lose his crown. Finally, he gestured to his wife, Amanda. "Come here," he commanded. Amanda approached the table, her face tight with worry. Bradley told her to take off her jewelry to match the stake. Unlike my girlfriend, Amanda hesitated. She looked at the pile of gold on the table and then at her husband. Bradley hissed something to her and showed her his whole cards. After seeing the queens, Amanda's face lit up with a smug, greedy joy. She immediately began stripping off her gold jewelry, tossing it onto the table with a clatter. "Come on," Amanda said excitedly, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "We'll bet with you to the end. Don't regret it when you lose. Everyone here is a witness. Whoever backs out is a piece of shit." "So," I asked, "you want to show the cards?" Amanda laughed. "Why would we show? We're betting you to the end." The greed on her face was ugly. She even took off her diamond ring and slammed it down. This diamond ring cost $50,000. I shook my head, looking at the ring with pity. "I'm not taking the ring. That thing is worth $100 at most." Amanda exploded, pointing a finger at my nose. "What the fuck do you know? This is a name brand. This is a designer ring." I smiled a bitter, cold smile. "I don't care what it is. To me, it's worth $100. I don't accept it." Amanda was about to scream at me when Bradley suddenly stood up, his face dark with a new, dangerous resolve. "Fine," Bradley said, his voice echoing. "I'm putting up my house too." The announcement hit the room like a physical blow. When Bradley said the words, "I'm putting up my house too," the air didn't just turn cold, it turned lethal. This was no longer a game of cards, it was a scorched earth policy. The entire family, from the youngest cousins to the oldest aunts, gasped in a collective, unified shock. Uncle Jim, who had been trying to act the part of the proud father, suddenly looked like he had seen a ghost. His face went from a triumphant red to a sickly, ashen gray. "Don't mess around, Brad," he shouted, his voice cracking with a fear he couldn't hide. "That house is downtown. It's worth $1.5 million. You can't bet the roof over your children's heads." But Bradley was beyond listening. He was caught in the gambler's fever, fueled by a toxic mix of ego and the absolute refusal to be beaten by a cousin he considered beneath him. He sneered at his father, his eyes never leaving mine. "Dad, I'm not messing around. Never. I bet he has to match. According to the rules we set, each bet can't be lower than the last one." He leaned over the table, his face just inches from mine. I could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. "Little bro," he whispered, a predatory grin stretching his lips, "do you have the money to match $1.5 million? Or is this where your little fairy tale ends?" I went silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on my chest. I simply didn't have that kind of money. I had a good job, I had a modest house, and I had my savings, but $1.5 million? It was an impossible mountain. Bradley saw my hesitation and pounced. He laughed loudly, a sound of pure, jagged triumph, and slapped my shoulder so hard it stung. "See? Some things you just can't afford to play, kid. I'll tell you straight, the first reason I am more successful than you is because I've got bigger balls. And the second? I follow through on my decisions to the end." He stood up, looking around the room at our relatives like a conquering general. "So, I'm not showing my cards. If you want to see them, you need to put up another $1.5 million. If you can't, I take everything on this table, the car, the jewelry, the house deed you just pledged. That's the price of trying to play with the big boys." My dad was trembling now. He looked at me with eyes full of tears, pleading without words for me to just give up, to let the nightmare end. The rest of the family had moved away from the table, creating a wide circle, watching us like spectators at a gladiator match. The family was gone. There was only the predator and the prey. "This is enough," Uncle Jim yelled, but this time he was yelling at me. "Look what you've done. You've pushed your cousin to the brink. Apologize now, fold your hand and maybe he'll be merciful enough to let you keep your girlfriend's jewelry. Don't be the reason your whole bloodline goes bankrupt." I looked at Uncle Jim. He wasn't worried about me, he was worried that if Bradley lost, the family's golden goose would be plucked bare. "Merciful?" I asked, my voice echoing in the silent den. Where was the mercy when he mocked my father? Where was the mercy when he used his wealth to bully everyone at this table for years? "You call this family, Uncle Jim? This is a cage. And Bradley has been the one holding the whip." I turned my eyes back to Bradley. He was still smug, leaning back, confident that I was trapped by the math of the game. He thought he had found the one wall I couldn't climb over, the sheer volume of his wealth. I looked at my cards one last time. 3 kings. The kings were staring back at me, regal and unyielding. In that moment, the fear left me. It was replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. "You're right about one thing, Bradley," I said, my voice cutting through his laughter. "Success does come down to following through on your decisions. But you made a mistake. You assumed that the only thing I have to bet is money." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted USB drive. I set it on top of my BYD keys. Bradley's laughter died. He looked at the drive, then at me. What the hell is that? A toy? This, I said, is the access key to the internal audit logs of your logistics firm. I've been an engineer for the company that handles your back-end systems for 3 years, Bradley. Did you think I just sat in a cubicle and stared at a wall? I know exactly how you've been business owning. I know about the advanced payments you've been skimming. I know about the tax discrepancies. Bradley's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being, a grayish, bruised purple. This drive, I continued, is worth exactly what your house is worth. Because if this goes to the board tomorrow morning, you won't have a house. You won't have a business. You'll have a legal team and a prison cell. The room went so quiet you could hear the heartbeat of the person standing next to you. Now, I said, my voice as cold as the grave. I'm matching your $1.5 million. Do you want to raise again? Or are we finally going to show these cards? The room didn't just go silent, it felt as though the very foundations of the house had shifted. Bradley sat frozen, his hand still hovering near his pile of chips, his eyes locked on the small USB drive as if it were a ticking time bomb. The big businessman bravado he had worn like armor all night was cracking, revealing the panicked, sweating man underneath. You're bluffing, Bradley whispered, but his voice lacked the jagged edge of his previous taunts. That's illegal. You can't use corporate data in a family poker game. We stopped being family the moment you treated my father like a servant, I replied, my voice a low, rhythmic hum of retribution. And as for legality? You're the one who put business advanced payments on a poker table. I'm just balancing the scales. The drive matches your house. Now, show your cards, Bradley. Or are you too timid to see this to the end? Amanda, Bradley's wife, was no longer looking happy. The smug greed that had lit up her face when she saw the 2 queens was gone, replaced by a frantic, wide-eyed terror. She grabbed Bradley's arm, her nails digging into his expensive suit. Bradley, stop. Just stop. He's crazy. Let's just take our things and go. We don't need this. But she was wrong. They couldn't just take their things. In the brutal logic of the game Bradley had created, there was no exit ramp. Bradley looked at his whole cards again. He was trapped in the gambler's ultimate nightmare, the sunk cost fallacy. He had already committed his BMW, $300,000 in cash, and his house. If he folded now, he was ruined. If he called and lost, he was destroyed. His only hope, the only thing his ego could cling to, was the belief that his pair of queens was the strongest hand at the table. He took a jagged breath and looked at me, his face contorting into a mask of pure hatred. You think you've won? You think a little plastic drive scares me? I have a pair of queens on the table. The odds of you having anything better than that are 1,000,000 to 1. He suddenly slammed his hand down, turning over his final hole card. The Queen of Diamonds. The room gasped. A collective oh my god rippled through the relatives. 3 queens. Amanda shrieked, her voice swinging back into a hysterical, high-pitched triumph. He has 3 queens. You're finished. You're dead. Give us the drive, give us the house, give us everything. Uncle Jim let out a massive sigh of relief, leaning against the mahjong table for support. Thank God, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. 3 queens. It's over. Bradley stood up, his stature returning, his eyes burning with a vengeful light. You tried to play God, little bro. But you forgot that in this world, money and luck go to the winners. 3 queens. You can't beat that with a BYD and a dream. Flip them. Flip your cards so I can watch the light leave your eyes. I looked at the 3 queens. They were powerful. In any other game, on any other night, they would have been the undisputed masters of the table. But I wasn't playing against luck. I was playing against Bradley. I didn't flip my cards immediately. I looked at my girlfriend. She was still standing there, her hand on my shoulder, her expression as calm as a frozen lake. She didn't need to see the cards. She already knew. Then, I looked at Bradley. You always talked about how I wasn't bold enough, I said quietly. How I didn't dare to take risks. But you never understood the difference between a risk and a certainty. You bet because you're greedy. I bet because I'm right. I reached out and flipped the first card. The King of Hearts. Bradley's smile faltered. A king. So what? One king doesn't win a pot. I flipped the second card. The King of Spades. The room went deathly still. Amanda's hysterical cheering stopped mid-breath. Bradley's hands began to shake, not a small tremor, but a violent, uncontrollable shudder. 2 kings, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Still not enough to beat 3 queens, right? Bradley was staring at the last face-down card as if it were the face of death itself. He knew. Deep down in the part of his soul that wasn't blinded by arrogance, he knew exactly what was under my hand. Don't, Bradley whispered, a single tear of pure terror tracking through the ash on his cheek. Don't do it. This isn't for the money, Bradley, I said, my hand hovering over the final card. This is for the cigarette. This is for my father's hands. This is for every time you made us feel small so you could feel big. I flicked my wrist and turned the final card. The King of Diamonds. The sound that came out of the room wasn't a gasp, it was the sound of a vacuum, a sudden, total loss of pressure. 3 kings. Bradley didn't scream. He didn't even move. He simply collapsed back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the 3 kings, his entire world turning into ash right there on the green felt of my father's old table. The silence that followed the reveal of the 3rd king was heavier than any debt. It was the silence of a man who had just watched his entire identity, his house, his business, his status, evaporate in a single heartbeat. Bradley sat slumped in the chair, his eyes glazed and hollow, staring at the 3 kings as if they were ghosts of the ancestors he had disrespected. "No," Amanda whispered, her voice breaking. She lunged for the table, her hands clawing at the chips and the keys. "It doesn't count. It's a mistake. He's cheating. He had to be cheating." "Sit down, Amanda," I said, my voice cold and firm. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on Bradley. The relatives were frozen. Uncle Jim looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. My dad stood behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder. It wasn't trembling anymore. I felt the weight of his palm, steady and grounding. He didn't care about the $300,000 or the BMW, he was looking at me with a look of profound realization. Slowly, I began to gather the spoils of war. I pulled the cash box toward me. I took the BMW keys. I gathered the gold jewelry and handed the chain and bracelet back to my girlfriend. She took them with a small, knowing smile, her eyes never leaving mine. "The house deed," I said, looking at Bradley. "And the shares of the company you mentioned to match the bet." Bradley didn't move. He looked like a statue of salt. Uncle Jim finally stepped forward, his voice a pathetic whimper. "Please. You can't take everything. We're family. You wouldn't do this to your own blood, would you?" I looked at Uncle Jim. "Where was the blood when you watched my father light that cigarette, Jim? Where was the family when you laughed while Bradley tried to bankrupt me? You weren't a family tonight. You were a pack of wolves, and I was supposed to be the lamb." I turned back to Bradley. I reached out and took the BMW key fob from the table. I held it up, the light catching the polished plastic. "You called my car a piece of shit," I said quietly. "You called my life a failure because I didn't chase your kind of success. But my piece of shit is paid for. My life is built on respect, not on skimming from audit logs and bullying people I'm supposed to love." I looked at the mountain of wealth in front of me. 300,000 in cash. A luxury car. A house downtown. It was enough to change the trajectory of my life forever. I could quit my job. I could buy a mansion next to Bradley's. But then, I looked at my father. I saw the way he was looking at Bradley, not with hatred, but with a quiet, devastating pity. My father didn't want the BMW. He didn't want the business shares. He just wanted to be seen. I stood up and did something that stunned the room for the final time. I took the BMW keys and tossed them back across the table. They landed with a clatter right in front of Bradley's limp hands. "Keep the car, Bradley," I said. "And keep the cash. To me, that money is tainted with the way you made it. I don't need your business payments to survive." The relatives gasped. Amanda stopped crying, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and hope. "But," I continued, my voice hardening, "I'm keeping the house deed and the company shares. Not for me. For my father. From now on, Jim, you and Bradley are going to answer to him. Every decision made in that firm, every dividend paid, it goes through the man you treated like a servant tonight." I turned to my father. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. You're a business owner now." My father looked at the deed in his hand, then at me. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. He didn't say, "Thank you," he didn't need to. The balance of the world had been restored. I turned to Bradley, who finally looked up, his face a mask of shame. "There's one more thing," I said. The room waited. "Get up," I commanded. Bradley slowly stood, his legs shaking. "My father's cigarette is out," I said, pointing to the cold ash in the tray. "Offer him one of yours. And this time, Bradley, you cup your hands. You protect the flame." In front of the entire family, Bradley, the man who thought he was a god, reached into his pocket with trembling fingers. He offered my father a cigarette. My father took it. When the lighter flickered to life, Bradley leaned forward, both of his hands cupping my father's hands in a gesture of absolute, public submission. The flame stayed steady. The cigarette was lit. I grabbed my BYD keys and my girlfriend's hand. We walked out of the house into the cool, crisp November night. The electric motor of my car hummed to life, a quiet, steady sound in the darkness. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house. It was just a house again. The theater was closed. The war was over. I didn't have a BMW, and I didn't have $300,000 in my pocket. But as my girlfriend leaned her head on my shoulder, I realized I had won the only thing that actually mattered. I had the kings. And I had the fire.